country. So unfortunately, the public believes in the FDA more than it believes in almost any other government agency, and it's extremely unfortunate that it does so, because this has been a lethal regulatory agency.
202 is the area code, 737-0001 for those of you in the East and Central time zones, 202-737-0002. Western and Pacific time zones. BookTV at cspan.org is our email address for our in-depth guest, Robert Higgs, Jackson, Wyoming. Thanks for holding. You're on.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I'm telling you, the hair at the back of my neck is standing up listening to you. Number one, you're a Bible reader. You know, what's the Bible say? A rich man has as much chance to get into the gates of heaven as a camel does get into the eye of a needle. And as for regulations, you don't believe in the speed limit. But that's not my point. My point is you keep saying the banks are responsible, AGI are responsible. These are human beings in these corporations that are responsible. And if there was a law of treason, these people have done more to harm this country than bin Laden did and the world. And if these people were gathered up and charged with treason, this is the thing. You had the tobacco company go in front of Congress and raise their hand and swear that cigarettes didn't cause cancer. And then they had to come back and admit that they lied, and then they were fined billions of dollars, and then they raised the tobacco products to charge the people they got addicted to the product to pay for their addiction. And nobody in those corporations got sent to prison for lying to Congress. The situation on laws for the rich. You, sir, are fascists. You believe that the corporations are able to rule. This is supposed to be a government of the people, by the people. This is now the government for the corporations, by the corporations.
I think you weren't listening earlier. I haven't said anything in the way of kind words toward corporations using government power to feather their nests. I'm completely opposed to that. I'm opposed to anyone's using government power to feather his nest, whether he's a low-income person or a powerful corporation. My conception of what the government ought to be doing is so limited that it verges on the government's total evaporation. So when big corporations use the government, that's the fascism you're thinking about, I'm entirely opposed to that. Now, what people frequently forget is when they create government power, somebody is going to have an incentive to seize it. And exactly what interest do you think will have that power? Do you think it's going to be poor people who run the government, or do you think it's going to be powerful corporate interests that are able to seize and use government power for their own purposes? People are very naive when they look to government to save the little guy without realizing that it's not the way government operates. Government purports to help the little guy. This is good campaign talk. This is good political rhetoric. But government is not beholden to the little guy. Government is beholden to all those interest groups organized for supporting politicians for office and keeping them there. So if we find that government officials are in bed with corporate interests, we shouldn't be shocked. We should say that's exactly what we should expect. The way to get rid of that problem is to take power away from government. If government didn't have the power to regulate products, then the producers of those products wouldn't be paying off politicians to win their favor for the kinds of regulations that will work best for them. So we need to get realistic about the nature of government and how it operates. To look to it and say it's in the hands of evil men. Of course it's in the hands of evil men. What did you expect would happen when you created government power? That do-gooders would come forth in masses and run the government? That's not the nature of the thing. Remember, it's force. Government is organized coercion. And when you have that kind of power available, it creates an enormous magnetic attraction for the most unscrupulous interests in society. It's like a loaded gun lying there waiting for someone to pick it up and use it for illicit purposes. So create a loaded gun at your own peril.
Vincent in Boston emails, Dr. Higgs says he does not support corporate bailouts, but he is evading the fact that a natural result of completely free markets and minimal government regulation is the growth of these too-big-to-fail entities. Is he saying that the systemic risk of letting these entities fail, as predicted by large numbers of economists in academia and government, is a fraudulent argument?
I am saying it's an almost fraudulent argument. We've heard a great deal of talk in the past 9 months about systemic risk. And the idea here, for those who don't follow this discussion, is that if we have a large institution such as AIG fail, it has so many interconnections with other large institutions, and they have so many interconnections with others, and so forth, that the failure of one big institution will drag down the whole world. This is an allegation more than an established scientific fact. And in fact, the best study I've seen of systemic risk, which was published a couple of years ago in the Journal of Financial Economics, found that systemic risk is a very, very small risk, almost negligible risk. But it's a very fine political lever, because politicians can come out and say, look, I know you people don't like the fact that we're wrenching money away from you and giving it to these big financial organizations, but we have to do it, because if we don't do it, your whole world is going to go to hell. That makes a great story. Perhaps some of these politicians even believe it, but there's no reason for us to believe it. There's no foundation for it. If we don't let big institutions go bankrupt, then we've simply changed the nature of our system. We've changed it from a market system, a system of profit and loss, into a system of private profit and socialized loss, which is a real fascist type system. And I'm sorry to see that the actions the government has taken in the past 9 months move us a considerable distance in that direction. And I say it's time to perform an experiment. Let some of these big institutions find their own way out of the trouble. If they can't do it, it's the market's way of telling them that they're not worth saving. If they're not worth saving, then why are we taking money from taxpayers to save something that isn't worth saving? I think it's a fraud to bring up systemic risk every time the government goes to bail out some of its friends in big financial institutions.
Greenwood, South Carolina, you're on with Robert Higgs.
Good morning. Thank you for C-SPAN. Mr. Higgs, I'm confused. You seem to enjoy the benefits of the government and the country, but at the same time you want to bite that hand that feeds you. You didn't answer the woman's question earlier when she asked you, would you give back your Social Security if you were taking it? Well, since you're not on it, when you become eligible, will you take it? Would you go so far as to not drive on public roads that were built by the government? And would you go so far as to give back your land that you own back to the Native Americans who were here before the government seized their property? Where does this thing end? It seems a very reptilian type of mentality. Thank you.
Well, as I said before, once you live in a world that is pervaded by government influences, where the government has built almost all the roads, where the government has taken money from people, including from me, since 1958 for Social Security taxes, to ask people at that point to forswear the use or the benefit that was promised them in exchange for their having paid taxes and obeyed rules for an entire lifetime is not exactly a good test of anyone's sincerity, and certainly not a good test of his reptilianism. If we had a starting point again, and we could say, let's start here and allow people to manage their own affairs voluntarily, peacefully, and cooperatively, and work on that basis, yes, certainly, I would want to start there. It's not an option for us at this point to start there. We can't efface a world that has been shaped and damaged and directed for centuries by government intrusion that ought never to have occurred. So here's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves